Hi and welcome to the second week of February. Pure Yoga, mindful movement, and it's a practice to find some space in the body. So I'd like to think about when you're breathing, bringing the awareness to the spaces that we're trying to create a little openness through. So it may be the chest, it may be the back, it may be the lower part of the back, it may be through the abdominals, it may be into the thighs, maybe into the back of the legs. We all know we can't take our breath actually practically into that space, but we can bring the awareness to the space whilst we're breathing, which sometimes lets that connective tissue release a little bit and those muscles to relax a little bit to help you go a little bit deeper into your range of movement. So we'll be working with two of the chakras today, which is Anahata chakra, which is the heart, and the Vishuddha chakra, which is the throat. So the heart is all about compassion and the throat is all about communication. The communication side of it is where we're going to bring our mind and body together so they communicate together to try and again allow ourselves into a little bit more range of movement. And the compassion part is to really think about the body when it's in that space, whether it feels right, whether you're trying to challenge it too much, maybe whether you're not challenging it enough. So that's where those two chakras come into this practice. So because we're working around the element of space, I really want you to think about when you come into maybe back bends, you're creating that space at the front of the body, and when we come into our forward fold, you're creating it at the back of the body. And if we're doing any kind of lateral flexion, that you're taking it into the side body. And I want you to think about breathing that space a little bigger. So let's get started. We're going to start in child's pose. So coming to bring your big toes to the back of the mat. And I'd like you to tuck your toes under for this and keep the heels together. So when you bring the seat back towards the heels, it's just going to stretch through the bases of the feet slightly. Keeping the hands closer to the body for a moment, just try and settle there. It might feel a little tight in the toe mounts, the big toe mounts. Just hold it there just for a couple of breaths and just stretch into those arches of the feet. Just bringing some space into that place. So just take a couple of moments in this space. And just breathe nice and deeply while you're here. So you can choose whether to use the mouth or the nose through the practice. The true yogic breath is in and out through the nose. And with that slight restriction at the back of the throat creates that Ujjayi breath. Okay, so untuck the toes and flatten the feet so we can bring some space across the top of the foot. And then slowly lower the hips towards the heels. Then just have a little rock of the body from side to side when you bring those heels back, just to loosen up through the hips slightly. If you're practicing early morning, maybe those hips feel a little tight from lack of movement whilst you've been in bed for probably anywhere between 6 to maybe 10 hours. And then start to walk the hands forward towards the front of the mat, creeping those fingertips forward, bringing the chest to the inside of those thighs. And when you've walked the hands as far forward as you can, bring the forehead to the mat and try and feel that space from those fingertips all the way to the armpits, from the armpits all the way to the rib cage, and the rib cage all the way to the hips. And when we're in this space, we're going to try and breathe our breath into different parts of the front and back of the torso. So first of all, I want you to think about deep breaths into the belly. So as you breathe in, that belly expands, and it comes to more in between those thighs on the inhale. And then as you exhale, you draw that belly back towards the spine. Do a couple of breaths like this. The breath in expands the belly and the breath out contracts the belly. So breathing really deep into that space. Again, using the nose if you can, or feel free to use the mouth if you're holding any colds or allergies. And then your next breath in, try and think about breathing into the lower back space. Bring your awareness to that place. It almost feels like the back expands on the inhale and you can stretch that skin on the lower back. And on the exhale, everything relaxes.
Also still bringing it into the belly if you can, but bringing the awareness more to that lower back. And then from that place, I'd like you to think about breathing into the front rib cage. So those intercostal muscles stretch on the inhale, which is the muscles between the ribs, and on the exhale they contract to squeeze the air back out of the lungs. And then start to think about breathing that breath into that space of the back, the upper part of the back, around the thoracic spine. Almost feel like you're filling that space in between the shoulder blades, in between the lower ribs with air. But also breathing into the front ribs at the same time, but just keeping your awareness on the back ribs. And then I'd like you to think about breathing that breath into the side ribs, so almost feeling like the torso expands from left to right as you breathe in. And then bringing the awareness up to the shoulders. Breathing into those shoulder blades, breathing into those collarbones, breathing into the shoulder sockets. And then try and think about the whole of that torso. So as you breathe in, you expand the belly, you expand the lower back, you expand the front, the side and the back ribs, and you expand the collarbones and the shoulder blades. Then as you breathe out, you contract everything back to squeeze the air back out. So thinking about that 3-part yogic breath into the belly, the back, the front, side and back ribs, collarbones and shoulders. And then as you breathe out, feel all that air be compressed back out. Your next breath in, walk the hands over to your right side of the mat. Place your left hand on top of the right, and then think about breathing that breath into that left side body, into the left side ribs, into the left side waist, down towards that left hip. Just being aware that you can send that breath to different spaces. And next breath in, walk the hands over to the opposite side of the mat. Right hand on top of the left, chest to the inside of the left thigh. And then breathe into that space on the right side body. Armpit, rib cage, waist and down to the hip. And feel the stretch around the skin of the ribs. The skin around the waist. Up to that armpit and down to that hip. Walk the hands back to the middle. Just take a couple of breaths in neutral spine. Then making your way up onto your hands and knees. Shoulders over the heel of the hands, knees underneath the hips. Then we're going to take a little bit of flexion and extension of the spine, taking ourselves into cow and cat. So on your breath in, start from the tailbone, start to roll up through the sacrum, lumbar, thoracic, cervical spine, lifting the head and the gaze, squeezing the shoulders back. And hold it here and breathe into that space of the belly.
the ribs at the front, the chest at the front, and into that throat space. And then starting from your tailbone, on your next exhale, start to curl from the sacrum through to the lower lumbar spine. Start to move it up into the thoracic spine. And then start to bring it into the cervical spine, tucking the chin into the chest. And hold it in this space for a couple of breaths. Breathing into the lower back of the ribs, the thoracic spine area. And breathing into the back of the neck. Just sending that awareness through those different spaces. Take it back into our cow position, so starting from the tailbone, rolling from the sacrum, through to the middle, through to the thoracic, starting extending the front of the body, lifting the chin to take it into the cervical spine. And then again, fold it back into cat. Tailbone where it starts, feeling each vertebra create some space as it rolls through and up into our cat position. Take it again back into cat. So we're starting to create the space at the front of the spine now. Taking that spine into extension and compressing the vertebrae on the back of the spine. One more into cat, tailbone tucks first. Send it all the way up the body. Just feeling that little bit of fluidity as you move through this space. And then bring yourself back to a tabletop position. Step both feet back into a plank. And then take the hips up to down dog, paddling the feet as you move around with the hips. Just feeling those hip socket joints, getting some space. Start to bring a little movement into the shoulders. And a little movement into both the knees and the elbows. Maybe just having a little nod and shake of the head. Then when you're ready, bringing those heels to a still position, encouraging the heels towards the floor. They don't have to reach, just to create some space around the calves and the Achilles. Maybe a little space through those hamstrings. But if you need to bend the knees slightly, if the hamstrings are still feeling a little tight, take a bend in the knees and that will take the pressure off the lower back. Just let the head hang. Let that spine feel like it's creating some space if you're holding in a slight inversion. Widen the fingers, widen the toes. Make sure the feet are hip width apart and the hands are shoulder width apart. Just holding in down dog, stretching through those back chain of muscles and contracting the front muscles. One more breath here. And then on your next inhale, bring yourself forward to a plank position. Drop down with the knees, untuck of the toes. Slowly release that body with the elbows grazing the ribs, bringing yourself all the way down to the mat. And as you release to the floor, bring your right hand out to the side, palm facing down, hand in line with the shoulder. And then push into that left hand and go to the right side body and feel that stretch around that pectoral muscle at the front of the chest on the right side body. So think about that space and start to take some deep breaths, trying to think about sending that breath into that pectoral muscle on the right side. Long deep breaths in, long breaths out. Maybe you notice little millimeters of change as you hold in the stretch. Then take a bend into your left knee. Bring your left foot behind the right leg
and lift that left knee up to the ceiling. So we're feeling like we're creating some space on the inner left thigh, inner left hip. Still keeping the awareness on that pectoral muscle on that right side body. Still sending that breath into that space. Keep those breaths coming nice and long. Maybe in and out through the nose if that's the choice that you've made to make your breath. Just one more breath here. And then bring that left leg back long. Roll back onto the belly. Bring the right hand back to meet the chest. Send your left hand out to the side, palm facing down. And then push into the right hand, roll onto your left side. And create that space now on the left side, the pectoral muscle at the front of the chest. Breathe into the space. Long breaths in. And long breaths out. Just noticing how maybe you're getting those little changes of movement. Maybe this feels a little tight for you. But just concentrate on the breath and trying to release those muscles and connective tissues out. Take a bend into your right knee, bring your right foot to the back of the left leg and then point that right knee up to the ceiling just to create some space on the inner right thigh. One more breath here. Then straightening that right leg back out, roll back onto the belly, bring that left hand back to the chest, then bring the hands forward, elbows under the shoulders, lift up the chest, push those hips into the mat, create some space in the lower spine so you're not dumping into that lower back. And then when you've pushed those hips in nice and strong, so you're engaging the glutes to do that, try and grow from the lower ribs up to the collarbones. And try and relax those shoulders down. And breathe into that lower rib space. Maybe you're feeling that expansion of the upper part of the belly as you breathe in. Feeling as that lower part of the belly is a little restricted as you're pushing those bellies into the floor. Then bring the awareness to the space of the lower back. If it feels like it's pinching, squeeze the glutes a little more and create a little more space in that lower back. But try and lift from the bra line up to take that extension more through the upper part of the back. Then release the chest back down. Bring the hands back by the side of the chest. Tuck under with the toes. Bring the chest back to the thighs. Bring the seat towards the feet. Walk the hands back. Then bring the top of the head onto the mat. Rest here, either using the hands to support, or if you wish to take a hold of the heels of the feet, hold on to the heels. Then wherever the hands are, your choice, either by the side of the head to support the neck or onto the heels if you're happy to bring it there. Feel the stretch through the back of the neck, then push into the toes, lift up through the hips, maybe bring the weight a little more onto that head but not compressing down into the spine too much. And breathe into that space of the lower, mid and upper back into that neck. Expanding the breath into the lower back, so feeling the stretch of the skin as you breathe in. Breathing into that space around the lower ribs at the back of the body, into the upper ribs at the back of the body, and into that space between the shoulder blades. One more breath here. Then release the hands back if they're not there already by the side of the head. Lift the shoulders. Sit onto the heels. Think about stretching the bases of the feet. Toes are tucked under and the toes are stretching. Just holding it here for a couple of breaths. Lifting tall through the crown. To take the thoughts off the feet, bring the arms up in front of you. Right elbow hooks under the left. Bring the back of the hands together, all the palms. Lift the elbows and breathe into that space in between the shoulder blades as we're creating the contraction of the front of the body and the stretch of the back of the body. One more breath with the arms in this wrap. Then release the hands, take the wrap the other way, left elbow under right. Bring the back of the hands together, all the palms. Breathe into that space again, in between those shoulder blades. If it's getting too much for the feet, release the toes out. One more breath here. Release the bind. Bring yourself back to your hands and knees. And then just tap out the feet, tops of the feet onto the mat, as you will feel a little tension that's built up into those toes. Then bringing the seat back towards the heels, heels staying together. Bring the hands towards the knees, because we've stretched the back of the feet, we're going to stretch the front. So push into the hands, push the chest into that space between the shoulder blades. And as you've done that, lift the knees away. Feel the stretch at the front of the leg, all the way up into those shins. And into the tops of the feet, to the tops of the toes. Really push away with the mat, with the hands. And again, maybe breathe into that space around the back, from the top of the back to the lower back, as you're rounding a little to push into the mat. Just holding for another breath. And then release those those knees back down. Bring your right hand behind, reach up with the left hand. Then onto fingertips of the right hand, push into the floor and lift the hips. Hold it in that space. So we're contracting the back of the body and stretching around those hip flexors at the front of the body. Try and think about breathing into those hip flexors, particularly that left side, because we're really stretching into that space as that left hand reaches back. Maybe you feel that stretch all the way up that left side body, up to those fingertips. One more breath here. Then release those heels back to the mat, the bums back to the heels. Left hand comes behind and come onto fingertips. Right hand lifts up, and then push again into those shins to lift up with those hips. And this time breathe into that right side hip flexor, all the way into that right rib cage, right armpit, all the way up to those fingertips of the right hand. One more breath here. Bring that awareness to that space of the right side body. And then release back out. Bring the seat back to the feet. Bring your right hand up to the ceiling. Turn the right palm to the back of the room. Bring the right hand to the upper part of the back. Reach forward with your left hand. Turn the left palm. Then bring the back of the left palm to the lower back,
or mid-back, wherever it reaches. Maybe you can then grab a hold of fingertips or just hold the hand in this space. This time we're breathing into that tricep on that right arm, thinking about creating some space around the back of that right upper arm. And try and keep the rib and hips tethered so we're not dumping into the lower back. So the hands, if you've bound, maybe look a little like this, or maybe your hands are still quite wide apart. But just think about lifting that right elbow as much as you can up towards the ceiling. One more breath here. And then release that grip back out. This time take your left hand up to the ceiling, turn the palm to the back and bring that left palm onto that lower part of the neck. Right hand comes out, turn the right palm, bring the back of the right hand to the lower mid or coming towards the upper back. Maybe you can take a hold of fingertips or you're just resting the back of the hands on top of the spine. Try and tether those ribs and hips again so we're not arching that back, we're engaging through that core centre just to create some space in that lower spine. We're trying to breathe into that space of that left tricep. Try and raise that left elbow up as high as you can towards the ceiling. Long deep breaths in, long breaths out. And then release the grip of the hands if you're gripping, or just release the hands from the back. Take a roll of the shoulders, bring them up towards the ears, and then send them back down towards the hips. Come back up onto the knees, bringing your right foot forward towards the front of the mat. Take the hands to the lower back, interlace the fingers. Push the hands down towards that left knee, squeeze the shoulder blades together, and then sink a little lower into the hips. Trying to feel that stretch along that front left hip flexor. So the back toes are untucked, tops of the foot is flat to the mat. The sole of the right foot is pushing into the floor to create some stability. So we're stretching down that left front thigh. We're trying to stretch through the chest to squeeze the shoulder blades together, so contracting the back and stretching through the front side body. Maybe then you want to lift into a little back bend, but try not to send the back bend into the lower back. Try and grow from the bra line up, lift up with the chest, lift up with the gaze. Maybe send those hands a little lower down that left back thigh. If you're pinching the lower back, just try and push the hips a little more forward and grow a little more through that thoracic spine, the upper part of the spine. One more breath here. And then lifting back up through the hips, just heel toe that right foot out to the side slightly to give a little more support, and then bring that right shoulder towards that right knee, raising the hands maybe from the lower back up towards the ceiling. And when you get to that fold over that right thigh, just release the neck. Let traction take a hold of that cervical spine, the weight of the head, pulling those vertebrae away from each other, creating some space around that neck. If it's uncomfortable for those hands to be lifted, just keep them at the lower spine. One more breath in this space. Then release the hands back to the lower back, lift up through the chest. Bring the hands to the hips and the right knee back to meet the left. Sit down onto the heels. Right hand comes behind, left hand lifts. Push those hips up, lifting away the bum from the heels, squeezing the glutes to push those hips as far forward as you can take them, and breathe into that left side body. Maybe you feel this comes a little easier the second time around. Then bring those hips back towards the heels, taking it to the other side. Left hand comes down, right hand lifts. Push into those hips, create that space around the right side this time, all the way up to the right fingertips and down to the right kneecap. Squeeze that bum as much as you can to push the hips forward as far as you can. And then bring those bums back towards the heels. Come up with the torso, shoulders stacking over the knees, knees over and hips. Bring your left foot forward this time. Interlace the fingers at the lower back. Push the hands down towards that right thigh. And then let the hips sink nice and low. Squeeze that right bum cheek to push those hips forward a little more and to protect that lower back. So we're holding with a little bit of contraction, a little bit of support, rather than just dumping and hanging out in the space. Breathe into the chest. Squeeze those shoulder blades together. Then if you wish to take it into a back bend a little more, try not to think about that lower back going any deeper into a back bend. Take the back bend from the bra line up, lifting up with the gaze, sending those hands maybe a little further down those legs. Think about lifting up through those rib cages. One more breath here. And then coming back up with the hips. Heel toe the left foot out to the side a little for a little more support. And then bring that chest to the inside of that left thigh, left shoulder to left knee. Let go of the head, maybe raise the hands up to the ceiling. Squeeze the shoulder blades a little more. Don't let the shoulders creep up towards the back of the neck. Try and create the space in that place. Then release those hands back to the lower back. Lift the shoulders back over the hips. Bring your left knee back to meet the right. Bring the seat towards the heels. Release the hand grip. Right hand comes behind, left hand lifts. Push into those hips, that left side waist, creating that back bend but not pinching the lower back. Breathe easy here. Breathe deep. Bring those bums back to the heels, taking it the other side. Left hand goes back, right hand lifts. And push into the hips. Squeeze the glutes. Send the right arm back as far as you can. And then bring those bums back to the floor. Start to walk the hands back to come to a tabletop position. Step both feet back to plank. And then lift those hips. Squeeze the heels back, taking it into our version of down dog. If you wish to still paddle the feet, feel free to do so. If those hamstrings are still screaming, bend the knees. It softens off that lower back. So walking the feet a little closer in, so we're shortening our down dog. Bring your left hand a little more to the centre point. Bring your right hand towards either the left knee, shin or ankle and hold on to that space. And then try and use that right hand as a little anchor to turn and twist the body to gaze under that left armpit. Relax through the toes, relax through the face, the jaw. Really using that right hand to make a little twist.
Breathe into that back body. Then bring that right hand back to the front. Bring it a little bit more centralised, but not totally in the centre. It just gives you a little more support. Then bring your left hand to either the right knee, shin or ankle. Use that left hand to anchor, turn and twist the body. Breathe that breath. Feel that little rotation through the spine as you gaze underneath that right armpit. Release that left hand back. Widen the hands again to shoulder width apart. Step the feet back to your regular down dog space. Your next breath in, come forward back to a plank position. Drop down with the knees, untuck the toes, turn the creases of the elbows forward as you slowly lower that body back towards the floor. So taking a bend into your right knee, bring your right hand to grab a hold of that right ankle, or if you need to use a strap or dressing gown belt, push those hips into the mat, bring the right foot closer towards the bum, and try and think about that space at the front of the right thigh, creating some length of that muscle, breathing into that space to release that connective tissue. So the nervous system quite often reacts when you first go into a stretch. And what we use our breath for is to try and calm that nervous system down. So the muscle knows you're not trying to hurt it, you're only trying to help it. Push those hips into the floor a little more. Bring that right foot towards the bum a little further. It doesn't necessarily have to reach, not everybody's feet get to the bum. Holding here just for another breath. Then release that right foot down, bring your right hand back to the side of the chest. Taking it on the other side, bring your left foot in towards the bum. Push the hips into the mat. Take your left hand to grab a hold of that left ankle. And then squeeze that foot into the bum. Squeeze the hips into the mat by contracting the glutes. Feel that stretch down that left side thigh. Into maybe that left hip flexor slightly. The more you squeeze the glutes and push the hips down, the more you'll feel it into that thigh. The more you draw that left foot towards the bum, you'll feel it into that lower part of the thigh. And if the toes are pointing, you'll feel it down the front shin and into that left top foot. One more breath here. And then release that left foot back to the floor. Bring both hands down by the side of the chest. So we're going to use a little contraction through the back. So bring the feet so they're just slightly apart. Push the hips into the mat. And then lift from the bra line up to bring the chest away from the floor. Then maybe lift the hands, bringing the arms into a little cactus shape. Really using the squeeze of the muscles in the back to create the space at the front body. So we're maybe just resting on those lower ribs, but we're compressing the belly, so it's hard to breathe into that space. So you need to take the breath a little higher and into that chest. Maybe the breath can come into those back ribs. Keep pushing those hips down. Squeeze of the glutes, create the space in the lower spine. And then releasing those hands back to the floor, the chest back to the mat. Tuck the toes under, bring the chest back to the thighs. Bring the hands back towards the knees. Tuck the head in, bring the top of the head onto the mat. Remember, you can keep your hands here for support if you wish, or bring the hands behind to take a hold of the heels. And as we've stretched the front body, we're going to stretch the back. So lift those bums away and feel the stretch in between the shoulder blades, around the neck, down into the lower spine. Really feeling that back body. Breathe into that space. Long breaths in, long breaths out. Remember, if your hands are here, you're taking a little pressure off the neck. Then bringing yourself up, keeping the toes tucked under, and bring the seat back onto the heels, finding ourselves in that toe stretch again. So this time we're going to bring our hands behind us, interlace our fingers, push our hands towards the feet, squeeze the shoulder blades together, tether the ribs and hips, and grow up through the upper chest to take it into a little back bend, squeeze of the shoulder blades, space in the front body. Just holding it in this toe stretch, breathing into that space, noticing those toes probably screaming at you right now. One more breath here. And then bring the hands down to the floor, bringing yourself into that tabletop position. Untuck the toes, just give those toes a little pat on the mat, just to release that tension out. And then bring the seat back to the feet, toes stay pointed. Bring the hands down towards the knees. Then we're going to push into those hands again to raise those knees away from the floor, stretching through the shins, up to the kneecaps, down to the toes. Push that chest back into that space between the shoulder blades. And breathe into the back. Release those knees back down. Lift the shoulders over the hips. Then bring the hands back to the floor, taking ourselves into tabletop position first. Then take the right foot so it comes off the mat and roll over onto your right side to find side plank with knee down. Reach up with the left hand. Try and create space across the chest. So think about the shoulders squeezing together. So we're going to try and take our right hip into a little more external rotation. So keep planted with the left foot and bring your right foot in towards stacking underneath that left leg. So now we're not using that right foot to balance, to stabilise. We're bringing it underneath the left leg, which may make you feel a little more unstable. And then I'd like you to squeeze the right bum cheek to push that right hip towards the left side mat. So we're stretching through that inner left thigh. Maybe breathe your breath into that space. And then turn the palm of the left towards the front of the mat. And then send that left hand towards the front of the mat. So we then create some space down that left side rib cage into that armpit. Maybe start to bring your breath into that space. So the knee is kept down the whole of this side. So we're really taking ourselves into a variation of tree pose, but just with the side support. So the external rotation of the right hip allows that inner right thigh to stretch. And we squeeze the right glute to push those hips a little further forward. One more breath here. Then bring that left hand back down to the floor, left knee back down to the floor. Take a little rock of the hips from side to side. You may really feel that squeeze of that right bum cheek if you've been activating correctly. So opposite side, take your left foot off the mat. Bring your right foot to the back of the mat and straighten the right leg. Reach up with the right hand, finding your side plank
variation first with the knee down. So the knee is staying down. It's the reason why we're taking this pose. We're not going into full side plank. And then find your stability by pushing into the right foot, and then bring your left foot in so it stacks underneath that right leg. And then squeeze that left bum cheek to push the hips forward. Maybe you feel a little more unstable on one side. Breathe into that space along the inner left thigh. And then turning your right palm to the front, and then reach forward with that right hand without creeping that right shoulder up to the ear. Create that space around that area. Create that stretch along the right side body from the fingertips down to the outside of the right foot. Still maintaining the squeeze of that left bum cheek to keep the hips pushed forward. Softness through that left elbow so you're not locking out in that joint. It really challenges the balance when you bring that stabilizer of the left foot under the right leg. Squeeze that bum cheek a little more. Just for one more breath. And then bring your right hand down to meet the left, right knee to meet the left knee. Take a little rock of those hips from side to side. And then crossing the feet over or swinging the legs around to the front, whichever way you're comfortable to make yourself into a seated position. So we're going to take a forward fold with a bent knee turn out to get into that inner thigh. So take a bend into your right knee, let the right knee drop out to the side. If you need to support it with a block, support it with a block, or just let it drop over. Shoulders are turning to face that left foot. I would like you to remove the flesh from under that left sit bone and then create space along the torso as you raise the hands. Try not to flare the ribs. Keep those left toes drawing back towards that left shin. And then start to lean forward over that left leg to bring the hands to wherever they reach. Breathe into that the back ribs. Breathe into the lower back. Maybe engage that left thigh to push that left knee down a little closer to the floor. Maybe try and squeeze that right glute to open that right knee out a little further to get into that inner adductor on that right leg. Use your breath to maybe find those minimal changes of range of movement as you fold over this left thigh. Maybe you feel that left hamstring giving a little as you breathe in and breathe out. Create that space along the torso, along the spine as you breathe in. And as you breathe out, maybe find a little more fold over that left leg. One more breath here. Then walking the hands back up towards the body. Bring that right knee back into the centre. Then straighten the right leg out. Bend into your left knee and let the left knee drop to the floor. Left foot to the inside of the right thigh. Remove flesh from under the right sit bone. Reach up with the arms to create that space along the waist and up through the crown of the head. And then as you breathe out, start to fold from the hips. Bring the hands to wherever they reach. Maybe you can feel it in that lower left side of the back as you fold over those thighs. Engage the upper thigh of the right leg to push that left knee down to create space around that lower hamstring. Bring the toes of the right foot back towards the shins to create space around the back of that calf on that right leg. Relax the shoulders, elongate, inhale, and fold a little more on the exhale. One more breath here. Then bring yourself back up, shoulders over the hips, straighten out with that left leg and take a little paddle of those legs. Make sure the bum is in the centre of the mat, heels are at the front. Make your way down slowly to the floor, bringing the torso down, finding a vertebra at a time to bring yourself down to the mat. And then when you arrive on the floor, make a comfortable space for the back of the head. Take a bend into both knees. We're going to take it into bridge position, so we'll be breathing into the front side body and contracting the back body. Gaze stays up, palms come down to the floor. Push into the feet. Feet should be hip width apart, and slowly and mindfully curl up through that spine, one vertebra at a time, bringing the chest towards the chin, the rib cages up to the ceiling, the hip flexors to stretch, stretching down the front of the thighs to those kneecaps. Push nice and strong into the feet. Engage the glutes to push those hips maybe a little higher. Breathe into that belly, lower ribs, upper part of the chest, and then as you breathe out, contract everything back. And again, breathe in, let that belly blow up. Feel the stretch of the skin across those abdominal muscles. As you breathe out, bring it all back. Next breath out, slowly let that body come all the way to the floor. Feeling each vertebra from the cervical, thoracic, through to the lumbar, through to the sacrum. Then the bum releases to the mat. Take a bend into your right knee and bring that outside ankle of the right foot onto the left thigh. Then bring that left knee in towards the body, bringing the left foot away from the floor. Maybe take a hold of that left thigh by threading the right hand in between the right leg and the left hand on the outside of the left thigh. Use the right elbow to push that right knee out if you've been able to grab the leg. And then draw that left knee in a little closer by using the strength of the arms. And feel and breathe into that space on the outside of the right hip. Working the stretch through that piriformis muscle and into that right side glute medius, the outside hip rotators that notoriously get tight as we move in one plane of movement most of the time, either running, walking, cycling. Quite often we don't take our body through all the different planes of movement. So this external rotation is a really good practice to perform most days. And then straighten up through your left leg to get a stretch down the back of that left side. Toes of the left foot back to the shins, pushing up with the heel of the left foot. Grounding into the floor with both back of the body, the sacrum area, so try not to lift that lower spine away. Pushing those shoulder blades into the floor to create a little space across the chest so we're not curling up through that body. And allowing the head just to relax on the mat. Then taking a bend back into that left knee, bringing the left foot back to the floor, bringing your right foot to meet the left. Then take the left outside ankle onto the top of the right shin, repeating on this side, and just being aware of whether one side feels tighter than the other. Bring your right knee in towards you, maybe take the hands to hook around the back of that right thigh. Use the left elbow to push the left knee out, bring the left toes back to the shins, and then use the breath, breathe into that outside left hip, to try and draw that right knee in a little closer, but also use the strength of the arms to help the movement. Be compassionate with how the body feels. Let the head and the body communicate. Let the breath help you relax those muscles, relax that nervous system to allow that body to take those minimal movements a little deeper.
Bring the awareness to how it feels from one side to the other. And then point up with that right heel, right toes back to the shins. Push the heel away, straighten through the back of that right leg, engaging that right thigh to help that leg straighten. Push those shoulder blades into the floor and create some space across the chest. One more breath here. And then release that right foot back to the mat, the left foot to meet the right. Allow the knees to drop out to the side. Just bring the hands onto the hips. Let gravity take a hold of the knees and just allow that stretch to come to the inside of those legs. And just breathe into that space, butterfly legs, just for a couple of breaths. Maybe close the eyes here. Just take a few moments just to consolidate everything you've just done through this practice. Just being aware of the spaces we've breathed into. Creating space at the front side body, the back side body, the side body. And sometimes giving time to create space gives space in the mind. Remembering we're connecting the mind, the body and the soul as we move through these practices. Switching off from the outside world and more to the internal world of your body. Emotions, feelings, sensations. Next breath in, help the knees back into the center. Bring the knees into the chest. Squeeze the knees in nice and tight. Maybe roll that lower spine away from the floor. And then take a hold of the crease of the knees. Just rock up and down that spine a couple of times. Up to seated once, back down. Up to seated twice, back down. Back up to seated. This time make your way into your favoured seat, keeping the eyes closed. Bringing the hands on top of the thighs. Lift up through the crown of the head. Feel like you're creating space through every vertebra of the spine. Then relax the shoulders back and down to create space across the chest, space through between those ears and the shoulders. Your next breath in, raise the hands up towards the ceiling, bring the palms together at the top. Then on your out breath, bring the hands to the chest, soft gaze to the floor. Have peace in your thoughts, your words, your hearts. From my heart to yours, Namaste.